Hi folks, HR Funk here. Some of you may know that I am not a huge fan of shooting firearms from the bench. Historically, I much prefer to shoot either holding a firearm just in my hands or supported by a sling or shooting from some field expedient position or something like that, but I'm not real crazy about shooting from the bench. However, over the years with all the firearm testing that I've done, many of you have made it known you prefer it when I shoot from the bench, so you can see what type of mechanical accuracy I may be capable of achieving with whatever firearm I am testing on that particular day. So grudgingly, over the years, I've done more and more shooting from the bench, and typically when you see me shooting from the bench, I am using my old trusty sandbags that I made out of a set of BDUs that were past their prime back when I was in sniper training. And over the years, my old trusty sandbags have gone through their share of calamities. They've gotten scuffs and scrapes and tears, which I've dutifully repaired in true Marine fashion with duct tape. And while they don't look all that great anymore, they still work pretty well, but they just look kind of shabby. So enter my friend Jamil Sued, who some of you may know from Gunstock Reviews, and Jamil, unlike me, is a true professional photographer and videographer, which is very apparent when you watch anything he produces, unlike when you watch anything I produce. But anyway, a couple of weeks ago, Jamil was watching one of my videos where I was shooting from my old trusty, albeit not so good looking sandbags. And he sent me an email and said, dude, why don't you get rid of those old crummy looking sandbags and get yourself a nice new professional looking machine rest to be able to use in your videos. Okay, that's not quite exactly what he said, but that's basically what he meant. By the way, thank you, Jamil. I really appreciate it. So Jamil put me in contact with Ransom International, and some of you may know Ransom International from their Master Series machine rest, which has been the industry standard for testing accuracy in firearms for decades. I think they've been manufacturing that machine all the way back to the 1960s. And it turns out Ransom International has another product called the Multi-Caliber Steady Rest. And I spoke to Mike at Ransom International, and he was good enough to send me one of their multi-caliber steady rests. And some of you have seen this in some of my more recent videos, and you've asked me about it, and I've been promising a full review of the multi-caliber steady rest, and that's what I'm going to be doing today in this video. And here's our first up-close look at the Ransom Multi-Caliber Steady Rest. And the first thing I'll tell you about this rest is it is extremely substantial. It is manufactured almost entirely out of solid aluminum, and I have no idea how much this thing weighs, but I think I'll grab my scale and we'll find out together. The scale is in place, and the Steady Rest is now on the scale, and it's weighing in at almost 6 pounds, as you see it here on the bench. So any rest is only going to be as steady as the bench that it's placed on, but so long as you have a steady bench, you're going to have a nice heavy rest to be able to put on that bench and be able to get the most accuracy you can out of the firearms you're testing. Adding to the stability of the Steady Rest are a trio of rubber feet that you see here on the bottom, and when you place the Steady Rest on a bench, these rubber feet tend to adhere to the bench surface and prevent the Steady Rest from moving under recoil. Now, if necessary, you can also clamp the Steady Rest to the bench surface. I have not found that to be necessary yet. Between the weight of the Steady Rest and the rubber feet, it has not moved for me with anything that I've shot with it so far. Another nice thing about these rubber feet, and I will place my Colt 1911 back onto the Steady Rest here, and you can see presently the muzzle is elevated slightly. If you're in a situation like this and you need just a little bit of fine elevation adjustment, particularly if you're aimed a little bit high, you can use this rear foot to bring that muzzle down just a little bit by backing it out. And when I place the 1911 back into the Steady Rest, you can see that The muzzle is lower now than it was before, so you can use that for a very fine elevation adjustment. One of the things I would like to see with the steady rest is a longer screw put in this rear position, so there was a little bit more adjustment that was possible there. Now there is a lot of other adjustment built into the steady rest. I'll talk about that momentarily, but the nice thing about this is it's very fine because you can screw that in just a little bit or screw it out just a little bit and get a very fine elevation or declination adjustment as necessary. Moving forward on the steady rest, we find the bag for resting the firearm that you're shooting. And this bag currently I have lengthwise on the steady rest, but this is also adjustable by simply removing these two screws on the bottom. I could position the bag so it was widthwise on the steady rest and then just replace the screws and it would be in that position. To make that even more convenient, there is an included hex wrench that stores inside the bag so it's ready anytime you need it. This hex wrench also works for the other things that I'm going to be talking about when we adjust the steady rest for different firearms. This portion of the steady rest is known as the V-block for obvious reasons. And at the top of the V-block, you notice there is a thin strip of suede meant to protect your firearm and also cushion it while it's resting here, so you don't experience any scratches or dings or anything like that that might occur if you had it resting just against the aluminum V-block. And also that cushioning effect helps to dampen the muzzle rise and the bounce you might get as opposed to if you had the firearm resting just on that hard surface. The V-block is adjustable by simply loosening these two handles. You can move the V-block up and down to whatever position you might need it. Then you can retighten the handles. And these are adjustable to make sure you keep them out of the way. If you pull back on the handles, you can reposition them anywhere you might want them, which is kind of nice. So you don't have them sticking out to the side or pointing some other direction where they might be in the way. You can move them back to wherever the most convenient position is. The V-block can also be repositioned if you need more clearance between it and the bag. In order to do that, once again, we will use the hex wrench that is stored in the bag and remove these three screws from the base. And I think I'll probably do this off camera because it's going to be easier than trying to hold everything in front of the camera to do it, but I'm just going to take all three of these out using the hex wrench. And I've now removed those three screws that you see right here. At this point, I am simply going to rotate the V-block 180 degrees, then I'm going to replace the screws and you'll be able to see the greater distance I now have between the V-block and the bag. And just that fast, I've repositioned the V-block and probably gained another 2 inches of clearance between it and the bag. So if you have a long-barreled handgun, you can use this type of an orientation and you should have no problem whatsoever. If you like, you can also completely remove the V-block from the steady rest and attach it to either a tripod, or in this instance, I have it attached to the top of a walking stick, so you'd be able to use that as a field expedient rest. And this is a quick example of exactly how that might work if you needed to use it in the field. And here I have the V-block mounted to a tripod, and this provides a very steady shooting platform, even more so than the staff that I had a moment ago. If you were in the field, particularly if you were seated in a blind or something like that, this would give you almost a bench rest quality hold for shooting. That's very steady. And also on the bottom of the steady rest, there is another threaded hole right here. This is also compatible with a tripod, so you can mount the entire steady rest just like that on the tripod. So if you needed a rest out in the field somewhere, you would have that for your handgun, whether you're testing it on the range or if you're actually using it for some other sort of a shooting application. After receiving and evaluating the multi-caliber steady rest, there was really no doubt in my mind that it offers a great deal of versatility and adjustability, But the question I had left in my mind is, does it really allow me to shoot any more accurately than my old trusty sandbags? So I decided to put that to the test. Recently, when I was out at the range, I had concluded recording another video, and while I had the steady rest there and I had my bags there, I decided to do a little bit of shooting from each. I had two different handguns for this first part of the shooting evaluation. One was my Beretta M9, the other was my CZ P01. You might have seen both of those in a recent video where I was looking at the velocity with NATO 9mm ammunition versus the barrel length of the handguns that I was testing. Those were the two most accurate handguns in that test, so I started out shooting a 5-round group at 25 yards first from the bags, and then 5-round groups from each with the steady rest. Here's how that went. So here are the accuracy results with that test fired with the M9 and the P01 from 25 yards. And I started out with the P01 firing from bags. And this group requires a little bit of explanation because, as you saw in the video, I gave this group one more shot. The reason is because this was a called flyer. When this broke, I knew the shot was going high. When I reviewed the video, this shot that went high was the one that I called, so I knew this one was my fault. So I went back and I put one more round onto this group with the P01, and I ended up with a 5-shot group that measures 2.75 inches center to center from the 2 farthest shot holes. In retrospect, I probably should not have done that. I probably should have just stuck with this group, because the whole point of the exercise is to try to see how much difference, if any, there's going to be in my ability to place accurate shots on target with the bags as opposed to the steady rest. So I'm going to revise this. I'm going to add this shot back in, so my resulting group from the bags with the P01 at 25 yards was 3.5 inches, albeit with a 6-shot group. With the Beretta, I had 4 shots that went into just over an inch. This is 1 1/8 inches. But again, I had a flyer with this group that went high and to the right, opening the entire group up to 3.5 inches. So these two groups are identical in terms of their size. Both of them are 3.5 inches. Moving down to the groups with the steady rest, this group with the P01 was actually slightly larger than I fired from the bags. This came in at 4.125 inches, but the group with the M9 is a very nice 2 1/8 inch, for an average of these two groups of 3 1/8 inches. And my average, when I include the flyer up here, is 3.5 inches. So the steady rest of these 4 groups was more accurate on average by about 3/8 of an inch. So not dramatically different. In fact, this is probably close enough that we could call it a draw, and clearly more testing was necessary. So yesterday we had the nicest day we've had so far in 2025, and I spent almost the entire day on the range, and while I was there, I decided it was time for the showdown between my old trusty sandbags and the steady rest. So in order to conduct this test, I took 3 handguns with me, and these are 3 of my most accurate handguns. The first is going to be my 4-inch Smith & Wesson Model 686. I fired 5-round groups out of this handgun with both 38 special ammunition and also 357 Magnum ammunition, because I wanted to test both of those for their accuracy. Next is my Colt Competition Series 1911 in 45 ACP. And finally, my Canik SFX Rival Dark Side. As I said, these are some of my most accurate firearms. I'm firing them again at a distance of 25 yards. I fired 5-shot groups from my bags, 5-shot groups from the steady rest, and also, just for fun, I decided to fire 5-shot groups standing unsupported from 25 yards to see how close I could get just on my own. So this is going to be man versus machine versus bags in a shootout for overall accuracy. Let's head out to the range and see how things went, starting with the 686. Here before you are the targets representing the 5-shot groups that I was able to achieve with the 686 firing that 38 special ammunition. Respectively, the target on the left is the 5-shot group that I fired off of bags. The target in the middle is the 5-shot group that I fired from the steady rest. And the target on the right is the 5-shot group that I fired standing unsupported. Starting with the target fired off of bags, this 5-shot group measures 3 7/8 inches from center to center of the 2 farthest shot holes. And you notice the group is high and to the right. And also, if we look at the group from the steady rest, it is also high and to the right. This is simply an indication that the sights were not properly regulated for this specific 38 special load, and a simple sight correction would be all that was necessary to bring this group to the center of the target. That's why I'm looking at group size, not group location. Moving to the group fired with the steady rest, this group measures 2 3/8 inches center to center of the 2 farthest shot holes, and obviously that is significantly tighter than I was able to achieve while shooting off of bags. In fact, that's a full 1.5 inches tighter group than I was able to get over here on this target on the left. Interestingly, when I was firing standing unsupported, I got a group the exact same size as I was able to fire off of bags. This one also measures 3 7/8 inches from center to center of the 2 farthest shot holes. And I was feeling pretty good about that. When I'm standing unsupported and I'm getting the same level of precision that I am off of bags, I'm pretty happy about that. But definitely in terms of precision and group size, the steady rest won round one. Now let's head back out to the range and see what happened when we tried the 686 with 357 Magnum ammunition. With the Magnum ammunition, the 686 has a 5-inch group off of bags, and this is sad because 4 of these 5 shots are in just under 2 inches, and then I had a flyer low down here. And I think this is where we really see the advantage of the steady rest, because I'm able to achieve pretty good accuracy from the bags, but then I'll have this occasional flyer. Moving over to the group with a steady rest, this is pretty impressive. This is a 5-shot group that comes in right at 1.5 inches. So that is very tight, very close to the center of the target. It needs just a little bit of a windage correction there, but overall that's pretty impressive. Once again, my group firing standing unsupported is the same exact size as the group I fired off of bags. This is also a 5-inch group, center to center from the 2 farthest shot holes, which is the exact same size as I got when I was firing from the bags. So again, I was feeling pretty good with my offhand unsupported shooting, but definitely the steady rest is winning the accuracy contest here once again in round 2. For round 3, let's head back out to the range and we'll see how things went with the 1911. With my Colt Competition Series 1911, off of bags, I have a group that measures 2 3/4 inches, so not bad at all firing from bags with the 1911. With the steady rest, I had a 3-inch group. So I actually, for the first time, beat the steady rest while firing off of bags. Not by much, only by 1/4 of an inch. So if I reshot this group, it's entirely possible that I would fire a tighter group the second time around with the steady rest than I did with the bags. But I was feeling pretty proud of my trusty old sandbags firing a nice 2 3/4 inch group. Firing standing unsupported, things were looking good for 4 of these 5 shots, and then I threw this one. I can't remember, I think this was the second shot. And I don't know what happened with that. It looked good when the shot broke. It ended up being a 6-inch group. So that's not too impressive, but at least I had a good group off the bags when I was firing, and the steady rest is not far behind it. For the final round, I was shooting my Canik Rival Dark Side, and once again, I fired a tighter group off of my sandbags than I fired with the steady rest. This time around, I had a 5-shot group from the bags that measures 1 5/8 inches. Off of the steady rest, my group was 2 3/4 inches, largely because of this one flyer. By the way, if you look at this, my SFX Rival Dark Side really, I think, is possibly my most accurate handgun. Look at that nice group right there fired off the bags. And this group really isn't all that far behind it. As we see though, the groups are off to the left, and I'll show you before we're done, I did a little bit of sight correction after I finished the accuracy test to make sure I had this dialed back in. Firing offhand, I had a 4 3/4 inch group. Again, it's slightly to the left, and again, that sight correction that I just mentioned a moment ago would have brought this over, so it was pretty well centered in the target. So round 4 goes to the sandbags. Now it's time to run all the numbers and see what the final standings are. By the way, there's my corrected group with the Rival Dark Side, nicely centered in the target. Everything is in the 10 ring except one shot that I pulled low, my fault, but the sights are back where they need to be at this point. Someone once said a big part of determining the eventual winner of any race has to do with where the finish line is drawn. And the way I decided to determine the final standings of these two different shooting platforms was to average the group size for each of the 4 shot groups that were fired. And when I average all 4 groups fired from the sandbags, I end up with an average group size of 3.125 inches, so just over 3.3 inches. When I average the size of the 4 groups fired with the steady rest, it comes out to 2.406 inches, so just barely over 2.4 inches. So the steady rest with an average group size of 2.4 inches is coming in measurably more accurate than I was able to achieve while firing off the sandbags. So that equates to about a 27% accuracy increase when firing from the steady rest as opposed to shooting from the bags. For anyone who's interested, my average group size for the 4 shots firing standing unsupported was under 5 inches. It was 4.91 inches, and I was feeling pretty good about that. The steady rest is 51% more accurate than I was able to achieve firing standing unsupported. So the steady rest does win the accuracy contest. Obviously, there are times, as we saw, that I was able to get a little bit greater accuracy from the sandbags, but what I notice is it's easier to achieve my accuracy when firing from the steady rest. I have to work harder to get that level of accuracy or to improve on the level of accuracy I can get from the steady rest when I'm firing from the bags. So there you go, folks. That's my review of the Ransom multiple caliber steady rest. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, as always, make sure you forward those to me. Remember, stop by my website, hrfunk.com. Check out the news and information page to see all the latest things that are going on with me and the channel. And also go by the products page because there are product manufacturers listed there, and there are links to those manufacturers. And below those links is some information that might just save you a few bucks if you decide to make a purchase. See you next time, folks. And until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.